The vast data repositories of the Galactic consensus stretched beyond comprehension, a network of quantum-encrypted archives that contained the collective knowledge of thousands of civilizations. Within these infinite digital landscapes, humanity occupied less than a microscopic fragment, a species so marginalized that its entire planetary record could be compressed into a data packet smaller than a single quantum-level communication burst. Archivist Sel Nera, a senior curator from the Temporal Cataloging Division, occasionally stumbled upon Earth's file during routine data maintenance. Each time, she found herself both bemused and dismissive. The file was a patchwork of contradictions, a planet of seemingly chaotic biological diversity, governed by fractured political systems, and displaying technological capabilities that oscillated between primitive rudimentary understanding and sporadic bursts of unexpected innovation. The last comprehensive review of Earth had been conducted 327 standard galactic cycles ago, a period so brief as to be inconsequential in the grand cosmic timescale, yet long enough for the consensus to effectively forget the planet's existence. The initial survey had been performed by a mid-level reconnaissance team from the Viridian Exploration Corps, a group more accustomed to documenting mineral-rich uninhabited systems than analyzing emerging civilizations. Their report had been brutally succinct, species demonstrating significant internal conflict, technological development extremely uneven, no unified global governance, potential for interstellar travel, minimal to non-existent, recommendation, no further observation required. What the report failed to capture was the underlying complexity of human potential. Earth existed in a state of perpetual dynamic tension, a planet where technological breakthroughs emerged from the most unexpected contexts. Research laboratories in crowded urban centers coexisted with communities still struggling with basic infrastructure. Powerful computational networks operated alongside regions with limited technological access. The Galactic consensus maintained strict protocols for civilization classification. Humanity remained firmly in the lowest tier, Class 5 Emerging Civilization, a designation that essentially meant monitor occasionally, but do not engage. Such civilizations were typically left to develop in isolation, with minimal external interference. Thousands of such planets existed across explored galactic sectors, most of which would never progress beyond their initial developmental stages. No one anticipated the extraordinary nature of human potential. The archival systems of Nexus Prime contained millions of planetary records, each represented by a complex quantum signature. Earth's signature was remarkably unremarkable, a dull, consistent frequency that suggested stability, but not progress. It blended perfectly into the background noise of cosmic data, an invisible thread in the vast tapestry of galactic existence. Nera's quantum-enhanced perception systems would occasionally generate a momentary alert when processing Earth's data, a microscopic fluctuation that suggested something unique might be developing. But these moments were always dismissed as computational anomalies, random variations in the massive data streams that flowed through the consensus archives. The official record stated simply, Earth, Sol system, third planetary body, emerging carbon-based civilization, no significant galactic impact anticipated. Beneath this clinical description lay a planet teeming with an energy that no archival system could quantify. A species on the cusp of something extraordinary, yet completely unrecognized by the vast cosmic bureaucracy that believed it understood every possible path of intelligent development. Humanity remained invisible. For now, in the shadowed corners of human civilization, a transformation was taking shape, a metamorphosis so subtle that it would escape the notice of even the most meticulous galactic observers. Research stations scattered across Earth's most remote locations became crucibles of unexpected innovation, their work a tapestry of seemingly disconnected threads that would eventually weave into a revolutionary whole. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's laboratory stood as a perfect example of this unrecognized potential. Located in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, the facility looked unremarkable from the outside. Funding was perpetually tight. equipment cobbled together from surplus academic resources and innovative recycling. Yet within these walls, something extraordinary was brewing. Her team worked across disciplines that traditional academic structures would have kept strictly separated. Quantum physicists collaborated with marine biologists. Computational experts shared workspace with ecological engineers. Their approach defied every conventional model of scientific research, a chaotic ecosystem of intellectual cross-pollination that would have bewildered more structured civilizations. The project that would eventually change everything began as a seemingly mundane research initiative into adaptive environmental systems. What started as an attempt to develop more resilient agricultural technologies gradually morphed into something far more profound. They were essentially creating living computational matrices that could learn, adapt, and transform in real time. A concept so radical that it existed beyond the comprehension of most established scientific paradigms. In a remote Arctic research station, a team of climatologists and artificial intelligence specialists worked on what appeared to be a standard climate modeling project. Their computers processed billions of environmental data points, but the underlying algorithm was anything but standard. It was a self-modifying system that could not just predict environmental changes, but actively suggest mitigation strategies that challenged existing technological limitations. Scattered across the globe, similar pockets of innovation emerged. A small engineering collective in Nairobi developed modular energy systems that could adapt to multiple environmental conditions. A group of interdisciplinary researchers in Singapore created communication protocols that reimagined how complex systems could interact and learn from each other. What made these efforts truly revolutionary was not their individual brilliance, but their collective approach. Traditional scientific models emphasized specialization and narrow expertise. These emerging human research networks celebrated complexity, embraced uncertainty, and saw boundaries between disciplines as opportunities rather than limitations. The global digital infrastructure played a crucial role in this unnoticed preparation. Open-source platforms, collaborative research networks, and decentralized knowledge-sharing systems created an organic, adaptive intelligence that transcended traditional institutional boundaries. A breakthrough in one corner of the world could be understood, modified, and built upon by researchers thousands of miles away within hours. Most critically, these efforts remained beneath the radar of traditional power structures. Governments and large institutional bodies were too entangled in their own bureaucratic systems to recognize the quiet revolution happening in their midst. Funding was minimal, recognition almost non-existent, but this very obscurity became their greatest strength. Dr. Rodriguez understood this intuitively. "We're not trying to create something spectacular," she would often tell her team. "We're trying to solve immediate, complex problems. The spectacular part will come later." And so, while galactic archives continued to mark humanity as an inconsequential species, the foundation was being laid for something unprecedented, not through grand gestures or massive technological leaps, but through a million small interconnected moments of human creativity and collaborative intelligence. The species that wasn't there was preparing to remake everything, and no one was watching. The transmission arrived with no fanfare, no dramatic buildup, just a sequence of mathematical symbols that would ultimately become the first tremor of a seismic shift in galactic understanding. Deep within the quantum communication monitoring station of the Galactic Consensus, a low-level data analyst named Zurakul found himself staring at something impossible. The mathematical proof had appeared in the most mundane of data streams, buried beneath layers of routine interstellar background noise. Most monitoring systems would have filtered it out entirely, but Zurakul's particularly sensitive algorithm, a personal project he developed during countless night shifts, caught the transmission. At first, he believed it was a system error. The proof solved the Riemann hypothesis, a mathematical problem that had remained unsolved for centuries across multiple advanced civilizations. Generations of the most sophisticated computational systems and brilliant minds from thousands of species had attempted to crack this fundamental mathematical challenge. And now, Here it was, solved by an unknown source from a barely classified planetary system. The transmission originated from the Mawson Research Station in Antarctica, a location so remote and seemingly inconsequential that most galactic monitoring systems would have immediately disregarded it. No advanced scanning technology had been used. No quantum computing clusters were visible. Just a small human research team working with equipment that would have been considered primitive by most spacefaring civilizations. Dr. Elena Petrova, the lead researcher at the station, hadn't even realized the full significance of what her team had accomplished. Their work had been driven by pure intellectual curiosity, a collaborative effort that bridged multiple mathematical and computational disciplines. They were solving the problem not as a grand challenge, but as an interesting puzzle that might help them understand more about complex systemic interactions. The Galactic Consensus had specific protocols for unexpected mathematical discoveries. A specialized review committee would typically spend cycles analyzing such a transmission, verifying its authenticity, and determining its potential implications. But this proof was different. It wasn't just a solution to a mathematical problem. It was a window into an entirely different way of approaching complex computational challenges. Zarakal knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. The proof wasn't just mathematically elegant. It demonstrated a level of lateral thinking that defied existing computational models. It suggested an approach to problem solving that was simultaneously intuitive and rigorous, a combination that seemed to contradict everything known about systematic reasoning. Within hours, the transmission had triggered a series of cascading alerts across multiple consensus monitoring systems. Senior researchers were pulled from ongoing projects. Computational analysis teams worked around the clock to verify and understand the proof's implications. What made the discovery truly remarkable was its context. The research team had no access to the most advanced computational resources. They were working with a combination of open-source software, creatively repurposed hardware, and a collaborative approach that emphasized collective intelligence over individual brilliance. Dr. Petrova and her colleagues remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic ripples their work had generated. To them, it was simply another interesting problem solved through teamwork and creative thinking. They would continue their research, unaware that they had just become the first whisper of a species about to dramatically reshape galactic understanding. The consensus would later mark this moment as the first true indication that humanity was something entirely unexpected, a civilization that could not be understood through traditional analytical frameworks. The species that wasn't there had just announced its potential, quietly, mathematically, and with absolutely no fanfare. The first human interstellar mission defied every expectation of the Galactic Consensus. It was not a display of overwhelming technological might, but a carefully calculated exploration that revealed a depth of understanding that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development. The vessel, christened Horizon Pioneer, was a testament to human ingenuity. Constructed through an unprecedented global collaboration, it represented something far more profound than a simple spacecraft. Its design incorporated technologies that seemed to emerge from multiple, seemingly unrelated scientific disciplines, adaptive materials that could self-repair, computational systems that learned and evolved in real time, and propulsion mechanisms that blended quantum mechanics with biomimetic engineering. Dr. Arya Chen, the mission's lead researcher and primary architect, embodied the complex nature of human potential. Her background was itself a narrative of unexpected convergence. Born to immigrant parents, educated across 3 continents, with expertise spanning quantum physics, cultural anthropology, and systems design, she represented a new kind of human intellectual approach. The Horizon Pioneer's first mission was not about conquest or resource extraction, concepts familiar to most spacefaring civilizations. Instead, it was a pure exploration initiative focused on understanding, communication, and mutual learning. The mission parameters were deliberately flexible, designed to adapt to unknown circumstances, rather than follow rigid pre-established protocols. Galactic observation teams watched with a mixture of confusion and increasing interest. The human vessel moved differently from any known exploratory craft. Its navigation systems seemed to anticipate challenges before they emerged, making course corrections that appeared almost intuitive rather than purely computational. Communication protocols developed by the mission team broke fundamental rules of interstellar diplomacy, where most civilizations relied on strict, hierarchical communication frameworks. The humans introduced adaptive language matrices that could dynamically adjust based on contextual understanding. It was less a language and more a living, breathing system of mutual comprehension. The most striking aspect of the mission was its team composition. Unlike most spacefaring civilizations that specialized and stratified their exploration teams, the Horizon Pioneers' crew represented a holistic approach to knowledge. Engineers worked alongside cultural specialists. Computational experts collaborated directly with environmental researchers. Every team member was expected to contribute beyond their traditional disciplinary boundaries. Their first significant encounter occurred in the tenacity system, an area previously documented as inhospitable and of minimal scientific interest. Where previous exploration teams had seen only resource depletion and hostile environmental conditions, the human team identified complex ecological potential and innovative adaptive strategies. Dr. Chen's approach during this initial encounter became a case study in a fundamentally different approach to exploration. When confronted with an unknown planetary environment, the team did not seek to control or extract. Instead, they approached with a combination of scientific rigor and profound respect, viewing the environment as a complex system to be understood rather than a resource to be exploited. The mission's communication logs would later become required study in diplomatic academies across multiple civilizations. They demonstrated an approach to first contact that was simultaneously humble and incredibly sophisticated, a delicate balance between scientific curiosity and deep empathetic understanding. Galactic archivists struggled to categorize the mission. It didn't fit into any existing exploratory framework. The Horizon Pioneer wasn't conducting a traditional survey or establishing territorial claims. It was engaged in something far more complex, a comprehensive, dynamic process of mutual understanding. What the Galactic consensus failed to realize was that this mission was not just an exploration of external space. It was an exploration of potential, a living demonstration of humanity's capacity to transform, adapt, and reimagine what was possible. The species that wasn't there had just shown that it was everywhere, quietly, persistently, transformatively. The transformation began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Humanity's approach to systemic challenges was not about replacing existing structures, but about introducing a radical new way of perceiving and solving complex problems. The quantum collaborative network emerged as the first true manifestation of this fundamental shift. Unlike traditional governance and research models that emphasized hierarchical control and rigid specialization, this network represented a living, breathing system of collective intelligence. Researchers, policymakers, technologists, and community leaders from across the globe, and eventually across multiple planetary systems, began to interact in ways that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Kama Okonkwo, a systems theorist who became one of the key architects of this new approach, described it as organic intelligence. Traditional civilizations built systems meant to be controlled. Humans were creating systems designed to learn, adapt, and evolve autonomously. Economic models were the first to experience radical transformation. Where previous galactic civilizations viewed economic systems as fixed mathematical constructs, humans introduced adaptive economic frameworks that could respond to complex social and environmental dynamics. Value was no longer just a monetary concept, but a multidimensional understanding of collective well-being, environmental sustainability, and human potential. The consensus watched in growing bewilderment as human-developed technologies began to solve problems that had remained intractable for millennia. A distributed energy network developed by a collective of researchers in Southeast Asia demonstrated how complex infrastructural challenges could be addressed through decentralized, adaptive systems. The network could predict and redistribute energy resources with an efficiency that seemed almost organic, anticipating needs before they fully emerge. Technological development underwent a similar revolution. Where most civilizations pursued linear technological progression, humans embraced a model of collaborative, cross-disciplinary innovation. A breakthrough in quantum computing might emerge from a team that included marine biologists, artists, and computational theorists. The boundaries between disciplines became fluid, transformative spaces of potential. Diplomatic interactions shifted dramatically. Human negotiation teams approached complex interstellar challenges not as zero-sum competitions, but as opportunities for mutual understanding and collective problem-solving. Their communication protocols incorporated elements of empathy, contextual understanding, and adaptive reasoning that completely upended traditional diplomatic frameworks. Educational systems were reimagined from the ground up. Learning became a dynamic, lifelong process of exploration and adaptation. Traditional models of education that emphasized rote memorization and specialized knowledge were replaced by holistic learning environments that cultivated creativity, critical thinking, and collaborative intelligence. The most profound disruption occurred in how civilizations conceptualized progress itself. Most spacefaring species viewed technological and social development as a linear progression, a march towards a predetermined ideal of advancement. Humans introduced a radically different perspective. Progress as a complex, non-linear process of continuous adaptation and collective imagination. Artificial intelligence development took an unexpected turn. Where most civilizations sought to create AI systems that could be controlled and directed, humans developed technologies that were fundamentally collaborative. These AI systems were not tools to be used, but partners in a collective process of understanding and problem-solving. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, reflecting on this transformation, would later write, "We are not trying to conquer or control. We are trying to understand, to connect, to reimagine what is possible when we embrace complexity rather than fear it." The galactic consensus found itself facing a profound challenge. The human approach was not about replacing existing systems, but about introducing a fundamentally different way of perceiving reality, a perspective that was at once deeply humble and incredibly powerful. The species that wasn't there had begun to rewrite the very rules of cosmic evolution. Diplomacy had always been a calculated dance of power, carefully choreographed interactions between established civilizations. Humanity transformed this ancient art into something entirely unprecedented, a living, breathing system of communication that defied every existing protocol of interstellar engagement. Ambassador James Chen stood as the epitome of this new diplomatic approach. His background was as complex as the networks he navigated, a third-generation immigrant, trained in quantum systems theory, cultural anthropology, and advanced emotional intelligence protocols. Where traditional diplomats saw boundaries, Chen saw intricate webs of potential connection. The diplomatic resonance network emerged not from government chambers or official institutions, but from a decentralized collaborative platform that combined the most advanced communication technologies with deeply empathetic human insights. It was less a diplomatic corps and more a living organism of mutual understanding. Each diplomatic engagement became a multilayered conversation that transcended traditional communication models. Instead of rigid negotiations focused on resource allocation or territorial claims, human diplomatic teams introduced frameworks that addressed fundamental systemic challenges. A dispute over mineral rights might evolve into a collaborative exploration of sustainable resource management and ecological preservation. The network's most revolutionary feature was its adaptive communication matrix. Traditional interstellar communication relied on standardized translation protocols that often lost nuance and cultural context. The human approach created dynamic translation systems that could capture not just literal meaning, but emotional subtext, cultural implications, and potential collaborative opportunities. Conflict resolution became an art form of extraordinary complexity. Where previous civilizations saw disagreements as zero-sum competitions, Human diplomatic teams introduced approaches that transformed conflicts into opportunities for mutual growth. A territorial dispute between two long-standing rival species might result in a collaborative research initiative that addressed underlying ecological or technological challenges. Dr. Aria Rodriguez, a key architect of these new diplomatic frameworks, described the approach as empathetic systems design. It was not about winning or losing, but about creating increasingly complex networks of mutual understanding. Each diplomatic interaction was treated as a living system capable of adaptive evolution. The communication technologies developed by these diplomatic networks were themselves groundbreaking. Quantum entanglement communication systems allowed for instantaneous, context-rich information exchange that went far beyond traditional data transmission. These were not just communication tools, but complex empathy amplification technologies. Cultural exchange programs became deeply transformative experiences. Unlike traditional diplomatic missions that maintained strict boundaries, human initiatives created immersive, bidirectional learning environments. Diplomatic representatives didn't just represent their species, they became living bridges between different ways of understanding reality. The most critical innovation was the network's decentralized nature. No single individual or institution controlled the diplomatic process. Instead, it was a collaborative, self-organizing system that could rapidly adapt to complex interstellar challenges. Researchers, community leaders, technologists, and traditional diplomatic personnel worked in fluid, dynamic collaboration. Consensus archivists found themselves increasingly challenged. Their traditional classification systems, designed to categorize and contain information, were becoming obsolete. The human diplomatic approach was less about managing information and more about creating living, evolving understanding. Ambassador Chen would later reflect on this transformation in a seminal text. Diplomacy is not about managing differences, but about creating new possibilities of collective imagination. We are not negotiating. We are co-creating. The invisible network continued to expand, a complex web of human-initiated connections that transformed how civilizations understood themselves and each other. It was diplomatic engagement reimagined, not as a tool of power, but as a profound act of collective discovery. The species that wasn't there had become the most powerful connective force in the galaxy, quietly, persistently, transformatively. The collapse of existing galactic power structures was not a violent revolution, but a quiet, inexorable transformation that left even the most established civilizations struggling to comprehend what was happening. The galactic consensus had existed for millennia, a complex bureaucratic system that had successfully managed interstellar relations, technological development, and resource allocation across thousands of civilizations. Its foundations seemed immutable, its structures seemingly impervious to fundamental change. Humanity proved otherwise. Dr. Elena Nakamura, a systems theorist who became one of the key architects of this transformative process, described it as evolutionary redesign, where previous attempts at systemic change had focused on replacing existing structures. Humans introduced an approach of adaptive transformation, working within existing systems to fundamentally reimagine their potential. The first major breakthrough came through an unprecedented collaborative initiative that addressed multiple long-standing galactic challenges simultaneously. A network of human-led research collectives approached seemingly intractable problems: environmental degradation, resource scarcity, technological stagnation, not as separate issues, but as interconnected systemic challenges. Their approach defied every existing model of problem-solving. Where most civilizations specialized and compartmentalized, humans created adaptive, cross-disciplinary networks that could rapidly develop and implement innovative solutions. The breakthrough in ecological restoration might emerge from a team that included quantum physicists, indigenous knowledge keepers, computational experts, and environmental scientists. Technological development underwent a radical transformation. The concept of proprietary technology, long a cornerstone of galactic economic and political systems, began to dissolve. Humans introduced collaborative innovation models that prioritized collective progress over individual or institutional gain. Research became a truly open, dynamic process of mutual discovery. The economic implications were profound. Traditional resource allocation models, based on competitive acquisition and strict hierarchical control, gave way to more fluid, adaptive systems. Value was no longer measured purely in material terms, but in potential for collective growth, environmental sustainability, and innovative capacity. Governance systems experienced a similar revolution. Centralized control gave way to more dynamic, participatory models of decision-making. The rigid bureaucratic structures of the Galactic Consensus found themselves increasingly irrelevant as more adaptive, collaborative approaches emerged. Environmental restoration became a showcase of this new approach, where previous civilizations had viewed planetary ecosystems as resources to be exploited or challenges to be controlled. Humans introduced holistic restoration technologies that worked in harmony with existing ecological systems. Entire planetary ecosystems that had been considered irreparably damaged began to show unprecedented recovery. The most critical transformation occurred in how civilizations conceptualized progress itself. The linear, hierarchical models of technological and social development were replaced by more complex, adaptive understanding of collective potential. Progress was no longer seen as a destination, but as a continuous process of mutual discovery and transformation. Existing power structures found themselves facing an unprecedented challenge. The human approach was not about conquest or replacement, but about creating more adaptive, interconnected ways of understanding and addressing complex challenges. Dr. Nakamura would later write in her seminal work, Evolutionary Consciousness, "We are not trying to destroy existing systems. We are trying to help them realize their own potential for transformation." The Galactic Consensus became something entirely different, less a governing body and more a collaborative platform for collective imagination. The rigid boundaries between civilizations began to dissolve, replaced by increasingly complex networks of mutual understanding and collective potential. The species that wasn't there had become the primary catalyst of a cosmic transformation, quietly, persistently, profoundly. The culmination of humanity's journey was not a moment of triumph, but a profound realization of interconnected potential that transcended every previous understanding of intelligent existence. Dr. Aria Chen stood at the epicenter of this transformation, though she would have been the first to reject any notion of individual heroism. Her life's work had been about creating systems of collective understanding, not personal recognition. The quantum resonance chamber before her represented the pinnacle of this collaborative approach, a technological marvel that was simultaneously a scientific instrument, a communication device, and a philosophical statement. The chamber was the result of a truly global, now truly galactic, collaborative effort. Its design incorporated insights from thousands of different civilizations, cultural perspectives, and scientific disciplines. It was not a weapon of conquest, nor a tool of technological dominance. It was a living testament to the power of collective imagination. Quantum entanglement had always been understood as a physical phenomenon. Humans reimagined it as a metaphor for cosmic consciousness, a way of understanding connection that went beyond mere technological communication. The resonance chamber could transmit not just information, but states of understanding that defied traditional communication models. The Galactic Archives would later struggle to categorize this moment. It was not a singular breakthrough, but a continuous process of transformation that had been quietly unfolding for generations. Humanity's true contribution was not a specific technology or diplomatic breakthrough, but a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Commander Zeralin, one of the first alien observers who had recognized humanity's potential, reflected on the journey. The species that had once been a mere footnote in cosmic archives had become the primary catalyst of a galactic transformation. Their approach was not about domination or control, but about creating increasingly complex networks of mutual understanding. The philosophical implications were profound. Previous civilizations had viewed intelligence as a competitive process, a struggle for survival and dominance. Humans introduced a radically different perspective. Intelligence as a collaborative, adaptive process of collective discovery. Every challenge was an opportunity for mutual growth, every conflict a potential moment of deeper understanding. Technological development became a truly open, dynamic process. The concept of proprietary knowledge dissolved, replaced by collaborative innovation networks that spanned multiple civilizations. Research stations became living laboratories of collective imagination, where the boundaries between species, disciplines, and ways of understanding became increasingly fluid. Environmental restoration technologies emerged as a showcase of this new approach. Entire planetary ecosystems that had been considered irreparably damaged began to show unprecedented recovery. The human approach was not about controlling nature, but about creating adaptive systems that could heal and regenerate. The quantum resonance chamber represented the culmination of this journey. It was not just a technological marvel, but a philosophical statement about the nature of intelligence, connection, and potential. When activated, it created a field of understanding that transcended traditional communication models, a living network of collective consciousness. Dr. Chen's final log entry captured the essence of this transformation. We are not discovering the universe. We are the universe discovering itself. Intelligence is not a competition, but a collaborative process of continuous becoming. The species that had once been invisible had become the primary lens through which the galaxy understood its own potential, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through a profound commitment to collective imagination, adaptive understanding, and the endless potential of connection. As the quantum resonance chamber hummed to life, it was more than a technological achievement. It was a beacon of possibility, a quiet, persistent declaration that the most powerful force in the universe is not technology or might, but the capacity to continually reimagine what is possible. The species that wasn't there had become everything.